the only funding that's usually available for profit, they are limited sliding scale spots, right? So for your practice to be sustainable as a for profit private practice and give sliding scale, it has to be limited for you to sustain. I'm Dr. Lawson, and after 13 years of running a nonprofit therapy practice and helping hundreds of therapists do the same, I'm passionate about transforming how we deliver mental health care. We all know that the system is not set up in the best way, and we're often faced with this dichotomy of choosing between working in community mental health or working in traditional private practice. And I've discovered a different way. So I want to share that all with you and talk more about what that actually means. So, as I mentioned, the elephant in the room is the mental health system as it exists today just doesn't work. And it wasn't designed to provide care to everyone who needs it. And that's not our fault. And it's a systemic issue. So, when you think about it, I pulled some statistics. The average wait time for therapy is 21 plus days. 21 plus days. 60% of people who need mental health care can access it. And therapists burn out trying to fill in these gaps. So the question isn't whether there's a problem, it's whether there's a solution to this. And that's what I want to talk about today. How do we change the fundamental access problem to mental health care? So, first, I want to talk about why the private practice traditional model, why it inherently has limits to access. And that's because there's only really three ways that we talk about for clients to pay for services within the private traditional therapy model of private practice. And those three traditional ways that clients pay for services are through insurance reimbursement, which we all know has its limitations and barriers and headaches and hoops and politics and all the above with it. Of course, there's the out of pocket full fee, which is unaffordable for many. And if any of you do this within your private practice, this is not to shame you. These need to exist. I fully believe in them. I think we need to charge what we're worth. That is not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about the access problem for those clients that can't afford out of pocket full fee. And then the third way, which a lot of private practices do, is limited sliding scale spots, which don't allow your practice to scale sustainably. And because that's the only funding that's usually available for profit, they are limited sliding scale spots, right? So for your practice to be sustainable as a for profit private practice and give sliding scale, it has to be limited for you to sustain. So why I'm saying all this is because it creates an impossible choice for therapists who have this heart of wanting to do service. And a lot of us, I think, our hearts are so big that we end up sacrificing our own income and our own well-being to provide this service. So with this, it serves only those that can afford or have good insurance. We offer a sliding scale, but that limits how many spots you can provide. Work for the community agencies with high caseloads and low pay. That's often a choice that we're faced with, or burnout trying to serve everyone at the expense of your own well being, right? So, this is why this matters. When a client reaches out for help and they can't access care, it's not just an inconvenience to them. Studies actually show that 63% of people who are denied care or are put on a wait list never end up seeking help again. So we're not just talking about missed appointments, we're talking about missed opportunities that may never come again to heal people who can't access care. So I think the question is, what if there's another way that we're not thinking about, that we're not taught about? And what if the limitation isn't actually you or your practice, but it's actually the business model itself? And that's this other way that I want to talk about. And obviously, to me, that is the nonprofit alternative. So the nonprofit model fundamentally changes the access equation that we're talking about because it allows you three things. And I'm going to go over those three things in depth. The first thing that it allows is the diversification of revenue beyond client fees. So when you diversify your revenue under the nonprofit model, which oftentimes you cannot do under a for-profit because there's limitations with a for-profit, you diversify it by getting access to grants that are specifically for mental health. You can contract with schools and other government agencies, county agencies that are program funded, which oftentimes you have to be a nonprofit to do this. You can offer tax deductible donations and community support. So basically, you can fundraise, which you can technically fundraise under a for profit model if you are following your state regulations, but it's not tax deductible for that donor and it's not tax exempt for you. As a for profit, any donations or fundraising you do, you have to pay taxes on. That's why putting it under the nonprofit model, when you do fundraising, when you bring in income, your corporate tax is exempt. So you're not paying the same amount of taxes that you are in a for-profit. And that's why most for-profits don't fundraise, right? And that's why nonprofits do, because it's tax exempt. And then fee for service still remains a part of this model. That is a foundation to your funding. So the foundation that exists in for-profits is the same in nonprofits, but in nonprofits, it's just the foundation. There's all these other diversifying revenue streams that you can tap into that you can't as a for-profit. So that's number one of why the nonprofit model fundamentally changes this access equation for people. The second thing is removing artificial constraints. So you're no longer limited by what clients can pay for out of pocket. Access to funding specifically for underserved communities exists for nonprofits specifically. And you have the ability to serve clients regardless of their insurance status. And you can build sustainable sliding scale models because you can support them through fundraising, through grants, through corporate donations, right? All of those things allow you to do sliding scale and supplement with these other funding sources. And then the third one is creating what I call the system level solution that a lot of community mental health agencies get right, but it's hard for them to retain the staff to do it. And that's address specific gaps in your community, target populations that traditional practices, not that they overlook them, but that they can't serve them because they're not sustainable when they serve them, and build programs based on need, not just profitability. Not that I'm saying for-profits only are focused on profits, but in a nonprofit, you can build programs on these needs and not have to worry about the bottom line. The other thing that it allows you to do is build collaboration and partnerships. The collaboration and partnerships is really what opens up the other foundational funding for your nonprofit. I mentioned this earlier, but this is really through contracts with your local schools, your county partners, your local city partners. A lot of people don't realize that you can do this as a therapy practice, and you may even get full program funded programs up and running, meaning it's not fee for service. It's a built-in salary for the staff providing the service. So I kind of want to share a real example of someone that did this. It's not my nonprofit, but it's a therapist that I knew working with back in the day. And actually her nonprofit is going to be a highlight in a couple of weeks in a post that I'm doing, because I like to do a monthly spotlight on therapists that have started successful nonprofits. So she started a nonprofit in the Bay Area of California. And, she had a history of working in community mental health for years and years and years, wanted to serve that community, but just felt totally burned out like all of us have felt in community mental health. She started this nonprofit private practice in 2021, started building it in 2019. I did a couple of consultation calls with her, and it has been amazing to watch the growth in this nonprofit, way beyond, I think, what she ever expected. She was able to add sliding scale spots that are unlimited. She secured a county contract for mental health services that allow associates to bill, which is huge, and maintained the income that she was making in community mental health and actually made more in her own nonprofit. And I remember I asked her recently, I said, do you regret doing this? Because starting a business, starting a nonprofit is hard. And she said, not in a million years. This is the best decision I've ever made. And her work life balance and the work life balance of her associates, she said it's just been the best move that her and her business partner ever made. So keep an eye out. Um, that nonprofit is called Omid Counseling. Again, it's in the Bay Area of California. I go into more depth about her story in a few weeks in a post, so I'll send that out when I have it scheduled in my post to come out for the nonprofit spotlight. So, what made this possible for her was not working harder, but it was just working differently, right? So, that's my goal here in this group is to really shift your mindset in how you can structure your private practice as a nonprofit. And it doesn't have to be um, the same functioning as community mental health. You can pull the best from both worlds and walk the middle path here. I want to go through some common misconceptions, and you've probably heard me say some of these before, but it's important to keep addressing because I know that with a new mindset shift, a lot of people externally might be telling us this is not possible. You might be having feelings of self doubt because of the misconceptions that you've heard. So I want to go through those. The first one that I get and hear all the time is nonprofit means no profit. Super hard reality check here. This is just not the case. It's so untrue. Nonprofit means no shareholders. It means no owners. You can still absolutely earn a competitive salary and benefits under a nonprofit. And I pulled some statistics here and some research on like what the average salary is. So the average salary for a nonprofit executive director with all the credentials that I know all of you have makes somewhere between 120,000 and 200,000 plus annually. And it totally depends on the size of the nonprofit, but it's absolutely above six figures. And depending on your state and like the reimbursements and all that, it goes into, why it's such a wide range, but it's not below $100,000. Myth number two is that it's too complicated to set up. I think this is what I hear the most from people because this is what other people tell them when they're setting up their nonprofit, whether it's like, an accountant, a lawyer, other people in the community. They just tell them it's too complicated and it's not possible. Or even I get that it's illegal, which is just wild to me because community mental health exists and it's existed for years. So it's not illegal for them. We're doing the same thing. It's not illegal for us. But the basic legal setup, it takes about the same effort as forming an LLC. There is some slightly more paperwork with it because of the 501(c)(3) status, but like actually getting it set up as a business where you can run and operate within your state is the exact same process, just different check boxes on the form when you register with your state as a business. So instead of registering as an LLC or an S corp, you're going to register as a C corp. Nonprofit C Corp specifically. Other thing that I get all the time is people say, well, I'm just going to spend all my time writing grants or I'm just going to go after grants and that's just going to solve all my problems. That's not how it works. Most successful therapy nonprofits have what I call a 40-30-20-10 funding model. That means that 20% of their funding, if they choose to fund with grants, it's only 20%. That's because grants are not our foundational funding. They are our supplemental funding. And grants are, honestly, they're hard. It's kind of hit or miss. You sometimes have to apply to a lot of them and you may never win that grant. There's a lot of oversight needed for them. And you're going to actually spend the bulk of your time doing what you already do in your for-profit because that's your 40% foundational funding, which is your client services and fee-for-service programs. So you're not going to be spending all your time writing grants. And if and when you're ready to go after grants, you're probably going to outsource it to a grant writer. That is best practice to do. And you're going to have a higher likelihood of getting that grant. Myth number 4, the last one that I want to go over, is that people assume they're going to lose all control of their practice because they don't own it. Yes, you don't own it, so of course you don't have complete control, but the reality is, as a founder of a nonprofit and executive director, you maintain operational control while the board, and you're part of the board, provides oversight and support. That is the job of the board. They're there to support the mission of the nonprofit and ensure that the nonprofit is operating how they say they're going to operate. So Yes, nonprofits are completely transparent, but it does not equal that you're going to lose control of your operations and your mission. I've never had an issue. In fact, sometimes I'm like, I wish that other people had more control than me, right? Like, I want other people to step in and help me run this. It just makes me feel not alone and it makes me feel supported in the process. The question here is not whether nonprofit is harder, it's whether it solves a problem that you and your community face, right? It's not whether not running a nonprofit is harder, it's just running it in a different way under the nonprofit model than you're used to in a for profit. So, if this resonates with you, here are a few steps to get you started exploring this model. The first thing is clarify your vision and your mission. So, who do you want to increase access for? Who specifically are you trying to serve in your community? What barriers exist in that community? And what does your ideal practice look like? Then go ahead and explore the legal and financial viability. So, research nonprofit requirements in your state. If you need help with that, let me know. Comment your state, and I'll send you specific links for that in the comments so you can see. You want to review your current financial model and identify any potential funding sources that aren't in your current financial model that are then accessible under a nonprofit model. After that, what I want you to do is connect with other people actually using this model. There are, believe it or not, a lot of therapists who have nonprofit therapy practices. I have connected with them all across the United States, and again, a monthly spotlight highlight so that you all know that this does exist out here and I'm not the only one doing this, and it is very sustainable. So go look at their websites, go and search in my group for nonprofit highlight and reach out to those people and get connected with them. I think honestly, though, the most important step in all of this is giving yourself permission to think differently about your practice and think about a different business model setup that might actually serve your needs and the community needs a little bit better than the traditional for-profit model.